late, so I do the best I can to start on time. So busy day again today. Thank you for being here. Okay, let's get right to it here this afternoon. We will have a hearing on House Bill 2111. This is increasing the CREP acres cap to 60,000 acres and a few other things along the way. So with that, we'll get your name right today. Kyle Hamilton from the Office of Revisor will join us.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Before diving into the bill, I'm just going to give a brief background of what CRP and CREP are. So CRP is it's a voluntary federal program that contracts with agricultural producers to take highly erodible and environmentally sensitive agricultural land out of production for 10 or more years. And the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP, was originally authorized by the Food Security Act of 1985, and then it was most recently extended by Congress in their appropriations bill in 2024. The stated aim is for CRP participants to establish long-term covers to control soil erosion, improve water quality, and develop wildlife habitat. And then in return, the Federal Farm Service Agency provides participants with rental payments and cost share assistance. And so there are multiple signups or sub-programs that agricultural producers can sign up for under CRP. And one of those sub-programs is CREP, C-R-E-P, which partners with states to address agricultural-related environmental concerns in specific geographic regions. So from what I could find, it was back in 2007, Kansas entered into an agreement with the USDA to form an upper Arkansas River CREP. The CREP program was reauthorized through the state budget process for multiple years until 2016 when Kansas's CREP program was finally put into statute. And so House Bill 2111 would amend that current statutory CREP language in the following ways. First, the acreage cap for CREPs would be increased from 40,000 to 60,000 acres, with the possibility of approving the last eligible offer that exceeds that cap. The limitation on acres eligible for CREP enrollment based on expired federal contracts would be removed. That language is on page 3, lines 3 through 6, and a general ineligibility criterion based on federal ineligibility would be added instead. Then, subject to USDA approval, CREP contracts would be allowed for dryland farming or limited irrigation to meet water quantity goals. That's page 3, lines 8 through 12. The prohibition on participation in CREP for government-owned water rights would be stricken. That's on page 3, line 15. Current CREP criteria related to water right usage, sanctions, and reporting would be clarified throughout pages 3, starting on line 35 through page 4, line 5. And then exceptions to eligibility criteria would be granted based on factors such as location in high priority water conservation areas, high flow capacity wells, and circumstances like bankruptcy. Reporting requirements would be modified to cover the preceding 5 years. And then House Bill 2111 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Hamilton? Representative Neely.
How does bankruptcy play a part in that?
I'll defer to the agent, to KDA, to respond to why that factor is being included in the new language.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Ms. O'Hara, any fiscal note?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Department of Agriculture and the Kansas Water Office indicate that enactment of the bill would have no fiscal effect on the agencies.
Any questions for Heather? Seeing none, we'll move on. First up, for proponent will be Josh McGinn, Assistant Deputy Secretary for the Department of Agriculture. Is this your first time testifying in committee in this capacity?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is the first time on the House side, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Welcome to committee.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I know this is a paperless committee, but our intern this year did print off some program guides, and so I just wanted you to see this. It is a quadrifold, I believe, so that you can put it in your farm shirt if you have one of those. But I also wanted to provide that because it does have a map. So if your computer screen is not out, we did have a map in our testimony, but it shows the entire project area for Kansas. So I won't go into the details. The revisor did a very good job of what CREP is and how that fits into the overall CRP type of program that is offered through the federal government. But I just wanted to focus on a few things and why we have this program here in Kansas and what it is used for and why we are asking for some of these changes. So in Kansas, the Division of Conservation, which is in the Kansas Department of Agriculture, is the primary entity that works with the FSA and producers and the NRCS. And we work with several other partners to help producers who want to voluntarily enroll acreage into the CREP program. And once you've enrolled in the CREP program and work with the state and work with the federal government, you would get a bonus payment from the state, and then primarily the federal government is who pays producers a yearly rental rate after they've enrolled that property into the program. So we support this program and we're asking for this bill because not only does it provide that economic payment to producers, which we're in support of, but it also provides water conservation and soil erosion benefits, among others. And during the entire life of this program, which we've had since 2007, we've had 24,000 acres enrolled in the program, and that's 142 state contracts and 174 water rights on 217 wells. On the second page of my testimony, it shows where some of those wells have been located over the course of the program. Like I said, this is in 13 counties in Kansas, and it was only recently expanded slightly by, in addition to the upper Arkansas River, which flows from Rice County all the way to Hamilton County, they added the Rattlesnake Creek Basin, which many of you are probably familiar with, as that is a significant area of concern for the state and for the agency. So there's a few more areas that are now eligible. But over that entire area, there are 570,000 irrigated acres. So when we're talking about 60,000 acres total, that is a small percentage of how many irrigated eligible acres are in that project area. And the project area is set in collaboration with the FSA and our State Department of Agriculture. So any changes to that, we would need to go through a process in order to change. But at this time, we believe this is a very good area for this program as it was originally designed, in addition to adding Rattlesnake Creek, because that's where we have a lot of the biggest issues with water conservation and soil erosion. And this provides a voluntary program for our producers to enroll their acres in. So on page 2, you'll also see how many acres have been enrolled in each county throughout the course of the program. Let's see. A few of the points about what we are changing in this bill, in addition to the overall acreage total, we are also allowing you, so we're making it clear that even if you haven't used half of your authorized quantity, if you've at least used 1/2 of 1 acre foot per acre you can still enroll in this program. And one half acre foot is 6 inches. So that's, in some cases, that might be kind of a more limited irrigation tool that you're using as a producer. And so, in many cases, this land may not be your most productive land. It may be land that already has some soil issues, and this program allows you to then enroll it into this program. You retire your water right, but then you get a rental payment and a bonus payment, and you're helping the state overall with water conservation and soil erosion. The other point I wanted to make, and the revisor mentioned this, was that it allows the agency to have some exceptions if the land is also identified in a high priority area for water conservation, which includes if your land is in another conservation program, such as the federal EQIP program, or a water conservation area, or a LEMA, or an IGUCA. So then it still allows the state to really focus on those areas where we have the most need. I think that's all I have. Oh wait, there's one more thing. So that is, our division has been working with FSA over the last year or more to try to add a dryland farming practice if you enroll in CREP. So I'm happy I remembered to mention this, because now, in addition to enrolling the acreage in the CREP program, getting the bonus payment, getting the rental rate, you can also continue to dryland farm once this is approved. And so we're excited to have that option. We're also continuing to work with the feds to allow for emergency. They allow emergency grazing, but we would continue to work with them to allow routine grazing and even potentially limited irrigation, although that's probably further away, because we believe even if it's limited irrigation or dryland farming, in Kansas we're trying to save water, so that still helps us while also keeping the land in production. So with that, I will stand for any questions. Thank you.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that. 100 acres at $200 an acre, equates to over a 15-year period is about $300,000. Do you have any idea what the ballpark figure would be time you add the state bonus, leasing it for hunting, what a potential somewhere, what that would return? I mean, close. And certainly this farming right now, you can only farm the corners correctly under the program.
So you can farm, thank you, Mr. Chair. You can farm the corners, but you can also enroll the corners into CRP, basically. And that's what a lot of people choose to do. So they'll get an irrigated rental payment for 130 acres, and then they'll get a dry land payment for 30 acres. But you could potentially still farm the corners, correct?
And that is one more, Mr. Chair. Is that now just restricted to HEL lands, and I know that's your priority, but do you see, as enrollment increases, going out into some other soil types that may not be highly erodible?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is a significant number of acres in the current program has been used for highly erodible soils, but not all. And there are some areas where there might be less erodible soils, but it still helps us with water conservation. And to your earlier point about the total payments, you are very close on that estimate. So we did do the numbers on one example, which would be if you did a quarter section, which is 160 acres, on the whole property, you would basically get over 15 years, $339,000 for the irrigated rental rate, $20,000 for the dryland corners, and then another $48,000 for the state sign-on bonus, for a total of a little over $400,000.
And that really doesn't count the lease you could do for pheasant hunting?
Correct.
And/or payments for Pheasants Forever or some of the other NGOs, does it?
Correct, thank you. Yeah.
I may have to move, thank you.
All right. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You said that there's a bonus payment from the state, but yet we were also told that there was no fiscal note. So I'm just wondering how that's possible that there's no fiscal note if we're putting more acres into this program and there's a bonus payment from the state, but yet there's no fiscal note to the bill.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just say the the program, there is a line item in the state budget for this. It is also split among a couple other programs. Frankly, I guess I should have mentioned, we are also doing this because there has been less enrollment in this program in recent years. And so I believe out of current dollars, we would be able to cover the growth in this program simply because this program has been relatively underutilized for a number of years. So I would not expect there to be significant fiscal effects on the state side because the other piece is that 80% is covered by the federal government. So it's a pretty good match. Thank you.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any part of this program that is not voluntary by the landowners?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is correct. This is an entirely voluntary program.
So you could not just go seize somebody's land?
Thank you. That is correct. You could not do that.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the ecological impacts. Have you seen like an increase of biodiversity because of a program like this? Have we seen like species that were previously kind of struggling to survive make a comeback? What has been the ecological impact of this program?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So part of the program is certainly focused on habitat restoration as well, and most of the existing program has been used to restore native grasslands. That is significant in western Kansas. I know Wildlife and Parks is kind of the lead agency on this issue, but we have an Endangered Species Act issue in western Kansas that the state of Kansas has really worked hard to address on our own without federal government interference, and restoring these to native grasslands, which is what most of the program has been used for, has definitely helped with that.
Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned in here that there is a provision for allowing grazing on this land. Is there also provision in there for water for the livestock that you put on that, or how is that managed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would believe that I would need to get back with you on that. I don't think that in these applications you would probably be using as much water because you would not be in like a feedlot stock water situation. But yeah, let me get back to you on that.
Can I have one more? One other question, if there's a well that's used for domestic consumption there, the water's piped to the residents or to the livestock operation now, how is that managed in this program? Is that left alone and it's just irrigation water, or does it affect other uses of water either for livestock or domestic consumption?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that follow-up question. So yes, this is primarily for irrigated cropland, and that's what the whole program is based on. So I will confirm with you, but I don't believe that you would be affected for other uses on that same property.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe here in the state of Kansas that non-confined animals, there is no tax. If animals are in confinement in a corral, then the individual watering those would be charged a stock water fee of 3 cents per thousand. But if these are on an open quarter of land, they're not confined. That wouldn't, and there is no tax on domestic wells, so there would be no problem with using an old irrigation well that has been entered into a CREP program, in my opinion, to water livestock that are not confined or to go to a house also. I think I'm close, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate that. That was much more articulate than what I can say, so I appreciate that.
I'll have questions, and if somebody else does, let Vice Chair know, and we'll get to you. Okay, how many acres are in right now? I think I missed that.
It's 24,000 total acres have been enrolled since 2007.
Okay. And all these different things you talked about for eligibility, again, we only know what we think we know. all these different, say, as you were going through that list of, you can kind of stack. Right. So is there a process of what gets approved in Kansas as far as, the more that land is, say, stacked into some of these other programs, does that make you more eligible for that CREP and that state payment, or how is it just a grid, and if you check all the boxes you're in, or go through that process of how, by doing this, opening this up, that we're going to add acres, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in Kansas, what the program and the Division of Conservation typically does is we provide all producers with this information, and then they may go to their local conservation office or local FSA office, and then the FSA has their own requirements for if you qualify for EQIP or some other program. Some of the things that I was highlighting in terms of LEMAs or IGUCAs or WCAs, that's just, we added that to the bill to make it clear that as those exist, we know that they tend to save more water in those areas. So we want to make sure that we're lined up and that you can be a part of that program or this program or both, if that really helps you more.
So does it matter? I mean, is that doesn't weigh eligibility? It's just to make sure, you just want to show that almost all could be eligible, is right?
Correct.
Dan?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Representative Seibert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And help me, is this just for irrigated land, or is this open to all farmers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This CREP specifically is focused on irrigated acres.
Okay, so if you do 6,000 acres and it's roughly 100 acres in a circle, that'd be 600 circles. Are they going to appropriate 600 more irrigation circles in, since you're parking those?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am not the chief engineer, but in most of this area, we are not, new appropriations are very difficult, if not impossible. So, okay.
Other questions? Other questions? All right. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's hard for me to sit here and be quiet. What you're doing here is excellent. I think we're expanding that, and especially in some areas like Quivira and the Rattlesnake Creek. It is not the entire solution, but it's a portion of it. In my opinion, if we save a little water here and a little water there, and pretty soon we're going to have a bigger savings. I've heard it said about money around here that seems to dwindle quickly. I'm trying to save all the water I can, every little pocket anywhere. My dream is someday at the federal level, on the federal farm program, they'll actually pay farmers to reduce their irrigation, still maintain and be allowed to farm dry land. We absolutely over appropriated in the state over the last 100 years. And we need to take some of those irrigation out of production, honestly. And to transition to that, I'd like to see a federal payment that would go to farmers if they're elderly and nearing retirement or want to reduce their equipment or labor load. I'd like to see it strategically placed around. I noticed a lot of the CREP acres in Kearney and Finney County. We don't want to put too much of it in a very small area because it's hard on the neighboring businesses also to maintain themselves. But I applaud what you're doing there. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Be around for questions afterwards. Up next, Justin Cobb, Government Relations Manager for the Nature Conservancy. Mr. Cobb, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The opportunity to provide proponent testimony in House Bill 2111. The Nature Conservancy is a conservation nonprofit. Apologies up front, I've got a little bit of a cough today. We have about 30 staff members across the state with a conservation footprint of around 200,000 acres, and we are one of the official working partners with the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, or CREP. I would echo many of the sentiments that Assistant Secretary McGinn shared as far as the importance and the value that CREP has brought to the state and being a voluntary water quantity conservation program. And I would in particular like to double down on the flexibility components that he mentioned. He also talked a little bit about how interest and enrollment has been down in recent years for this program. And part of that is just due to its reputation as being successful. And so the majority of CREP acres do go into native grass cover. And when we look at those acres, as Representative Blex mentioned, a lot of that is highly erodible soil, very sandy soils. And so this being an FSA program, they have to follow those federal protocols to establish that grass. And we've seen in a lot of cases those protocols simply do not work. The protocols would tell you what your seed mix is going to be, what your watering schedule is going to be, how you're going to do this down to the detail. And so producers who have found that this protocol doesn't work for them can either pick between successfully establishing grass on their own without any financial assistance or technical oversight, or they can try their luck at the CREP program with the dollars, but knowing that they may end up just standing on sandy soil at the end of the day. And this is where really applaud the work of the department to get those additional flexibilities. It's not easy to do with the federal government. You've got to prove everything. Local producers in Southwest Kansas are already on the way to doing that. But providing for these additional flexibilities is certainly a good starting point in House Bill 2111. It's also not just for the producer feasibility of it, but it's also on the conservation side. Representative Mosley asked a great question about the ecological benefits of CREP. And rarely in a conservation program is fallow or complete rest the best option when it comes to habitat. We would really like to see, if we're going to establish native grass, we would like to see grazing on it. We'd like to see that diversity of habitat be established. The mulching of soils allows there some good nutrient intake in there as well. And so providing those flexibilities does have positive conservation outcomes, as well as hopefully will re-incentivize producers that this is a feasible program that can work for them. So being that, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony. Happy to stand for any questions.
All right, Justin, thank you. Questions? Mr. Cobb? Representative Blex.
Thank you, Justin, for making that. And the feds, when they roll that, and establishing any vegetation on pure sand is difficult, and they have the ability to irrigate some for what, 3 years until they can try to get a stand established, and then what is the consequences after that 3-year period if they're still can't get a stand established? Where are we at on that? I've been a while since I worked with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would defer slightly. I believe Steve Frost is in here, but depending on the situation, I believe you can get an extension for your grass establishment. If you apply for it, you can receive it. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have success after that extension, but they can grant you additional years to attempt establishment.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. Also, you know we have written testimony for proponents from Dan Meyerhoff, Kansas Social Conservation District, Ken Askren from the Kansas Farm Bureau. Now for neutral testimony, calling Randy Stuckey, Senior Vice President of Government Affairs, General Counsel, Kansas Feed and Grain, and Kansas Agribusiness. So, Mr. Stuckey, welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. So my first time before the committee this year. So I've been here quite a few number of years, but for the new members, that's who I represent. I'm the lobbyist for agribusiness in Kansas, essentially the grain elevators, the agribusiness retailers, and some other agribusiness interests too. So we do stand in an awkward position on this bill today. Neutral testimony, what is that? Well, we got some good things to say and a little bit of concerns. And, you know, the good things to say about this bill are exactly what you've just heard. You know, the whole point of the CREP program, as it was introduced in 2007, passed in 2008, specifically in the southwest Kansas area, and then is extended into the Rattlesnake Creek Basin. You know, it's intended to address the riparian health of the stream banks and the streams, and other related health of the benefits of the area. So for all of those reasons, it makes sense. It makes sense to fund this program, to continue the program, certainly in those areas that are heavily, heavily appropriated for irrigation. We'll just say it that way. for the future use and health of that area. So there's the proponent testimony. That's why we want to stand up and say, yes, please do what they're asking you to do on this bill. And so we're weighing neutral because we have a concern. Concern has to do not necessarily with there's two things here the bill addresses: scale of the program and scope. Scale of the program. In 2007, when it was discussed and brought to the legislature and passed, we had 10,000 acres. 10,000 acres increased to 20,000 acres. And that didn't happen without conversations before the legislation was brought at the time with the producers in the area, the ag producers, the farmers, the agribusiness folks that sell inputs to the farmers in those areas, small businesses, they're not all global businesses. We have family-owned businesses that operate in and around those areas. And then the grain elevators on the back end. When you enroll land into CRP and CREP, and again, good programs. My parents enrolled farm ground into CRP when I was a kid. I get it. They're good programs. But they don't come without a cost of some form. So scale. Here we are increasing or asking to have the authority to increase the authorized quantity from 40,000 acres in those 13 counties to 60,000. It's a considerable increase. You have 24,000 enrolled today, but the authority is 40. The ask is 60. That's an additional authority of 36,000 acres asked. We have no problem with that. You just heard Josh comment that there's 570-some thousand irrigated acres over those 13 counties. You can absorb likely the full 60,000. It's 10%, but I think it's probably absorbable. We don't stand in opposition at all to the 60,000 acres. What's left then? It was mentioned, the concentration of those acres. And what this bill doesn't address, well, let me go back. What was addressed in conversations and was put into the legislation that was passed 20 years ago, 18 years ago, was a county cap as the best way, as the best tool to try and limit the negative impact, if there was going to be some, on the concentration of those authorized acres over those 13 counties. No more than, the language was, it still is, no more than 25% of the total enrolled acreage shall be authorized in one county, which makes sense. It makes more sense for us at 10,000 than it did at 20. 25% of 60, okay, now we're talking about 15,000 acres in the county. That's a 50% increase concentration potentially in any one county. That's our issue. If there's an issue, we don't know. Even that 15,000 acres in any one county may not be an issue depending on what acres are enrolled. But we don't have a tool for that digs down into the township level. And I'll tell you how this is, you can figure out how this plays out. You've got a farmer who thinks this is a great program and they've enrolled some acres and they're taking advantage of it. All's right with the world, so they go down to have coffee in the morning at the co-op, at our member's business, and they tell their adjacent farmer, hey, this is a great thing, you should look into it. Now we have adjacent farms both saying this is a great thing. That's how we get concentration enrolled into an area. It's organic. It's going to happen. So it's not a concern that's overstated, I don't think. It was addressed initially in 2007, no more than 25% of the total. Well, that no more than 25% of the total today means 15,000 acres, potentially with 2 neighbors, 3 neighbors in a township. Now you're affecting that small agribusiness that sells the inputs to the farmer. That's a family business many times. Certainly going to affect, even if you go from irrigated ground to dryland farming, that you're going to cut that production in half. That's going to affect the grain elevator in the area. You know, so that's our concern, and we've brought this to the KDA's attention, and they understand what we're trying to say. They understand the history behind the issue. So in our testimony, you'll see there at the end, we just ask for maybe consider changing the 25% cap to an acreage limit. If this is the only tool we have, the county cap, to consider changing from 25% of the county acreage, or the states in one county, to maybe just an acreage cap in a county. It's 10,000 now. 12,000 gives you 2,000 additional acres in that county. I think it's a reasonable recommendation. We've agreed to work with KDA on another fix if they think there's a better fix. But that's our concern. We think it's legitimate. And, Mr. Chairman, we stand for any questions at the appropriate time.
Question, Mr. Stuckey. Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I didn't see an opponent on any of the county commissioners. How is this impacting going from irrigated tax base down to, say, a dry land? Are we seeing issues with that in small counties?
Yeah, so I think there's one county in particular that's reached that 10,000 acre mark, and but that was done years ago. So whatever impact is probably absorbed by now. But your point is well taken. We have a direct impact when you enroll too many acres in one trade territory. And I use that term loosely. There's no defined trade territories, but you know who you market to and where you market your grain from. So that's the direct impact, is the agribusiness and the grain elevator. But the tax base is going to directly be affected, for the ground that goes from irrigated to non. So thank you for that point. I didn't go in that far down the rabbit trail, but it's a legitimate concern.
Well, may I follow? I mean, they're not here. Why aren't they here if it's real? I know those small counties and county commissioners, they're struggling for income. I mean, I'd think if this is significantly packed, no part of the program gives a payment in lieu of taxes, does it? I can't recall if it does.
Yeah, I don't think so. I can't really speak to that.
Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for not asking this of Mr. McGinn, but are there, as you look at the federal government's goals in setting up this CREP, are there some acres that are more valuable in doing that than other acres, and some areas more valuable in that? And should that come into the equation when you start talking about putting caps on acres per county, or should we be looking at more some kind of a value on an acre as far as what it contributes to the goals of the program?
Yeah. So, Mr. Chairman and Representative, as I understand in my conversations with, yes, to the point of your question, those are legitimate considerations and merit additional conversation. But in my conversations with KDA, they have their hands tied considerably, as this is not a state program, this is a federal program, and they administer that program through MOUs, memorandums of understanding, with rules that come from the federal government. So to more smartly administer the program, yeah, you're exactly right. Likely the worst acres available, or those acres that the landowner is going to want to enroll, those that he makes the least amount of money on. But your point's taken.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Mr. Stuckey? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you for your time.
We also have a neutral written only testimony from Shahira Stafford from the Kansas Co-op Council. Are there anyone else in the audience wishing to testify? I probably should ask before on the really either proponents, opponents, or neutral. You have a flexible chairman. You make the rules as you go. Right, Madam Chair? Sure. Sure. All right. Anyone else wishing to testify on House Bill 2111? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on House Bill 2111. We will be meeting tomorrow, have a hearing on House Bill 2063, and we may work these two bills tomorrow. I'm going to see if we think it might work. If you want to, let me know. If you don't want to, let me know. But we'll have another hearing. Now, just a quick, as we look at next week, we will not be meeting Friday. Even though some of the morning committees aren't meeting Monday, if you celebrate Sunday, you should be healed up enough to be here on Monday, this committee. And Saturday, when K-State beats KU again in basketball.
You are jinxing things all over the place. You're ruining the whole weekend.
Oh, don't worry, I've ruined many a weekend, so, yeah.
Sports guys.
So we will have hearings, 2 hearings a day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we'll probably do emergency final action on bills Thursday, but we will be meeting on the 17th as well. That's the last day we can meet. We will have some state FA officers here, and we will also have a couple of bill hearings. And so it's going to be another full day. That'll be, and then if EFA, probably those, if we decide to work them, we'll see how things go, and then go from there. So any questions? Thank you, Representative Rozier, again. We appreciate it. And that was very good to Brett again. So anything else to go to the cause? Seeing none, we are adjourned.